Pew Charitable Trust puts out some very nice surveys, and they are done well, and they are always, interesting in terms of just what Americans are thinking about. They have some other surveys outside the US as well, but largely American. And we'll look here at how Americans view national, local, and personal energy choices. Most Americans want more renewable energy, but support has dipped. Support has actually dropped. Interest in electric vehicles has also declined. This came out in June 2024, just about a year ago, so that's not good news. The survey conducted May 13 to 19 among 8,638 US adults finds a fairly modest share of US adults, let's say 25%, say it's extremely or very important to them personally to limit their own carbon footprint. Far more give this middling or low priority. So, when I say save 25%, they say 25%, but you are doing a sampling, and usually these samples are done very intelligently, so they do represent the mood of the nation as a whole. And that's obviously a split decision. If people say they are interested in reducing their carbon footprint, doesn't necessarily mean they will start taking action or that they are very consistent in their action. Knowing and doing something, behaviors, attitudes, choices are complicated, but nonetheless, when far more give this idea of reducing carbon footprint middling or low priority, then obviously that means we are looking at a country that may not be so keen on climate action as a whole, but that still doesn't really, capture the truth, because if you give them climate solutions, efficient cars, appliances, decarbonize the system, they will not stand and say don't do it, except it depends on how you do it, right? So there are also issues about how you ask the questions, but Pew already knows that, so we have to just take the results as very valid. There's been a decline in the breadth of support for wind and solar. We'll look at some number. Interest in buying an electric vehicle is lower than a year ago in 20, so that's down 38% from 2023, but that was 29% in 2024, so fairly low but dropping. Still, a majority of Americans, 63%, support the goal of the US taking steps to become carbon neutral by 2050. So that's what I mean, that these things can appear contradictory, but it really depends on how people see things as their choice, their community's choice, and the nation's choice. Support for expanding wind solar power in the US has fallen since 2020. The percentage of US adults who say they favor more in the country, more solar or more wind here. So you can see May 20 it was 90%, and now May 24 it was down at 78%, and wind power went from 83 to 72. Is that statistically significant? Well, it's not good news either way, but you also know that by May 24 there was a new president, right? No, 24 was the election, 25 was when the new president came in. Biden had put in many climate actions into a budget item that then got stuck in various ways, but let's not go there. What's behind the declines in support for wind and solar? Declines in public support for renewable energy have been driven by Republicans and Republican-leaning independents whose support started to fall sharply after President Joe Biden took office in early 2021. So you can see the perceptions can change based on who the president is. 64% of the Republicans say they favor more solar panel farms, down for 84% in 2020, and 56% of Republicans say they favor more wind turbine farms, a 19 point drop in 2020. So you have to be careful about how these numbers will behave now that they have a Republican president who is dismantling many of the climate action items and climate research centers, weather and climate prediction centers, and so on. Let's look here at growing partisan divide in support for expanding wind solar power in the US. So this is solar power and wind power going from 2016 to 2024. Democrats and leaning Democrat have remained essentially flat around 91 to 93%, 94%, and Republicans and leaning Republican independents on the other hand have gone from 87% in 2016 to down at 64% by May 2024, which is a little scary, honestly. Wind power, Democrats and leaning Democrat have actually stayed almost flat again, but here Republican and leaning Republican independents have gone from 80% to 56%. There are some details on how these things work in terms of putting wind in your backyard. Not many people are favorable because that drops property prices, and there is always the noise it makes and aesthetics and so on and so forth. But these are probably about country as a whole. Then we'll look at individual choices as well a little bit later. Young Republicans give priority to developing renewable energy over fossil fuels in the US. So even if you're a Republican, it depends on your age group. So expanding exploration and production of oil, coal and natural gas is given in these green numbers, but expanding wind, solar and hydrogen production is given in these blue numbers. And US adults, you can see that 64% are favorable in May 24 for expanding wind, solar and hydrogen production, whereas 35% still want expanding exploration and production of oil, coal and natural gas. If you split that into Republican and leaning Republican, 61% in favor of fossil fuels and only 38% in favor of expanding renewables. And if you look at Democrats and leaning Democrats, it's only 12% supporting fossil fuel, whereas 87% want to go for renewable in terms of prioritizing. But if you split this Republican, leaning Republican into age groups, you can see for age 18 to 29, the support for renewables is up at 67%, but as you increase the age to 30 to 49, fossil fuels go up, renewables drop, and then it keeps dropping at 65 plus. You have 76% of the Republicans favoring fossil fuel exploration, with only 22% saying let's do expansion of renewables. So it does depend on which side of the aisle they come from. 58% of the Americans, on the other hand, oppose rules aimed at dramatically increasing electric vehicle sales in the US. It's probably detailed in terms of prices, anxiety, range anxiety, charging station network, and God knows what other ideological anxieties are associated with this. Among US adults, 58% oppose, only 40% favor, but Republicans 83% oppose, so only 16% favor, whereas Democrats are only 35% oppose the idea of dramatically increasing EV sales, whereas 64% favor it. Declining share of Americans say they are likely to consider buying an electric vehicle. So if you look at 2024, it's not too keen or not at all keen is 57%, or very at somewhat keen is only 29%, and there are some who don't plan to purchase a vehicle at all. So you have to, keep them out. 2023 it was only 50, and in 2021 it was 46. So number of people who are not wanting to buy EV has gone up, and very or somewhat has also gone down by 10 points, right? So 1 in 4 Americans say limiting their carbon footprint is extremely or very important to them. So if you look at adults, extremely or very keen interested is at 25, somewhat 42, not too keen or not at all interested is at 32%. But among Republicans, extremely and very interested is at only 11%. Democrats, it's at 39%. Somewhat interested is at 35% among Republicans, but 46% among Democrats, and 53% not at all interested among Republicans, and only 14% of the Democrats say they are not at all interested. But as I said, this really depends on what options they think they have or they actually have to reduce their carbon footprint. If the includes a lot of no's, like don't eat meat, don't drive, don't buy a big car, don't fly, and so on, then these numbers may just be imaginary numbers, because even the 39% who are extremely keen or very keen, very interested in reducing their carbon footprint may not in reality be doing much. They're just interested. So what they do and what they're interested in are very different, but it may matter still, because they may support policies to reduce overall carbon in being locked into products and manufacturing, and improve efficiencies they may support, and decarbonization may be supported by them, and so on. 64% of US adults prioritize renewable energy over fossil fuels. Only 29% want to cut fossil fuels entirely. So expanding solar, wind, and hydrogen at 64%, expanding fossil at 35%. So we are repeating some of the numbers in a different way, but nonetheless, phasing out fossil fuels completely to rely only on renewables, only 29% are supportive, whereas 69% say use a mix of fossil fuel renewable energy sources, which actually makes sense at this point, because we've seen some issues in Spain and Portugal and so on. The grids have to be ready for it, and intermittency of the renewables have to be considered, and the system has to be ready for actually switching to complete renewable. For such a large country, that's not a trivial problem, all the details, smart grids, etc. Simply put, the shares of Americans who place the highest priority on limiting their own carbon emissions or expect to make big changes to the way they live because of climate change remain relatively small. Those who place a high priority on reducing their own carbon footprint or expect major direct impacts from climate change are far more likely than other Americans to back aggressive steps to reduce carbon emissions. So there is a sense of climate risk. Some people who experience climate impacts feel more gung-ho about supporting climate action and reducing carbon emissions, but others not so keen. For instance, 70% of those who place high importance on reducing their own carbon footprint support rules to dramatically boost EV sales in the US by 2032. Much smaller shares of those who say reducing their carbon footprint is somewhat or not too or not at all of interest, not at all important to them, support this. Let's much smaller shares of these people support the importance of reducing carbon footprint, and 43% of them say they are somewhat interested, or 14% say they are not too interested or not at all interested. Okay, so let's see at some more numbers. Declining Republican support for developing renewable energy among US adults. It has gone from 2022 at 77% to 64% in 2024 May, and expanding fossil has gone up from 22% to 35% from October 2019 to May 2024. And if you split that into Republicans and really leaning Republican, the percentage for renewable was decent, 62%, but now it's dropped to 38%, and fossil fuel has gone from 37% to 61%. So climate risk is somehow being disconnected in their mind from fossil fuels versus renewables. I don't know whether they know what the costs are, or whether they feel that tax dollars are going towards this, and so on. And there are many details that other studies have reported in how people perceive these things. If you look at Democrats, basically numbers have stayed the same for fossil fuel and renewables, and they are fairly high, above 85% the whole time, almost above 90% most of the time. So also declining Republican support for wind and solar power. Solar has gone from 80 to 87 to 64. I think we already looked at this, but let's look at nuclear. So Republicans have increased their support substantially from 51 to 67% from 2016 to 2024, whereas Democrats have gone from 38% to 49%. Why Republicans support more nuclear? You have to go and read that, but now you know that the current president is also pushing for revving back up the nuclear plant. Offshore drilling, high support among Republicans, which is consistent with interest in fossil fuel exploration, but Democrats remain much lower. And hydraulic fracturing, which is a way to extract small amounts of hidden oil, has gone up for Republicans and remains high at 68%, whereas for Democrats it has dropped from 31 to 23%. How people perceive risks from hydraulic fracturing or fracking is very different among Republicans and Democrats, and they have many environmental impacts as well on water quality, and people are also worried about them causing earthquakes or just degrading land, environment, and so on. Coal mining, of course, Republicans are above 64% in terms of support, whereas Democrats are down at 16%. So all consistent in terms of party line choices on energy. Growing age gap among Republicans, so more and more young people remain gung-ho about solar and wind, which is not surprising, but the older ones are dropping very steeply, so this is probably worth understanding as the demographic aging is growing. So why are older people so against renewables and for fossil fuels? 1/3 of US adults say a nearby solar development would help their local community. So if you go from national level choices to community level, and then we'll look at individual level. So help local, what are the ideas they have about nearby solar development? It helps local economy. Some things it makes no difference, some things it actually hurts a local economy, but those numbers are small and many are not sure. Okay, you can also see in this that young Republicans are favorable and Democrats are favorable, but older Republicans are only slightly positive about nearby solar helping their local economy. So the perceptions are completely different, even to theoretical questions about what do you think about a nearby solar. Americans have mixed views on how wind and solar power developments would impact their community. So many have negative views, so make the landscape unattractive, take up too much space, and they think it would impact their community. And if you look at positive comments, lower the price you pay for electricity. 37% say it would not, 44% say it would. Bring in more tax revenue, 39% say yes, and 26% say no. And there is just as large a number saying they are not sure. So that's for solar. If you look at wind, similarly, you have people who think wind can make the landscape unattractive, or it will take up too much space, and many think it will lower the energy prices, but many don't agree about equal numbers. And here 40% think it will bring more revenue, but 27% think it would not, and 32% are not sure. So I'm not reading in detail because you get the idea by now that there is a split decision on the renewables for the country as a whole at national level and also at community level. What happens if you start looking at other more details? So depending on whether you are in a rural area, suburban or urban, your perception of whether the nearby solar would improve your economy or make the landscape unattractive. Urban people are somewhat more favorable to renewable, but they don't have space, and maybe they don't see it as much as the rural people do or the suburban people do. Nonetheless, the urban people say that they expect electricity prices to go down, and more tax revenues to come in, whereas rural people are less, they think that's not so obvious. Most Americans say that large-scale solar isn't too common in their community, so solar panels on a person's home. So this is how they see solar in the neighborhood and community. Extremely, somewhat, and not too common, or not at all common. That's solar panels on a person's home. Solar panels on a building in a parking lot. The number of people who don't uh, see in their community is larger, and large solar panels even more. 64% say it's not at all common or not too common in their community to see the solar panels. And there is obviously a similar number for wind. So you get the idea that there is a mixed bag in terms of how Americans view their energy choices. Significant number of Republicans support fossil fuel exploration and do not support expanding renewable energy, and they don't even support marketing of EVs. So maybe that was all related to Biden, but now the new president has gone quite the other way. It's not clear what will happen in the coming years of the current presidency, whether Republicans will support more nuclear, for example, because the president is supporting more nuclear and not so much the renewable, and fossil fuel is again drill baby drill kind of philosophy. So we'll have to just wait and watch. Anyway, I thought this is interesting to look at because Europe keeps on saying this: we are, in a climate crisis, and that we need to do a lot. And many countries in Europe are going big on renewable energy, EVs, and even subsidizing EVs and renewable energy deployments. And of course, they are also dealing with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which is affecting their gas supply, and they have to worry about their winter heating. I've discussed this elsewhere, but it's always complicated. When you ask questions, you get some sense of what people think, and since they vote, it does matter what they think, because they may or may not support actions based on their perceptions and opinions. Okay, so let's leave it here. Yes, it is dark here. I have lights on because I recorded this podcast just a few hours ago, and then I found this little news item from Inside Climate News. This is on May 31st, 2025. So you can see that the headline is quite interesting. Let's say clean energy project cancellations top $14 billion so far in 2025. Businesses have pulled the plug on big projects amid Trump's retreat on climate action, but plenty remain in the pipeline awaiting a congressional decision on tax credits for these deployments of renewable energy. I won't say more. I just wanted to add this because we just looked at how Americans feel about the various renewable energy choices at national level, community level, and individual level. And there is obviously a party line difference, but now we are beyond climate denial. We are into dismantling climate actions, climate research centers, climate prediction centers, and so on. We don't know where it's headed, but we have to take it seriously, in the sense, just because climate community feels that this is very urgent, this is a crisis, there may be quite a significant number who don't feel the same. So we have to move fast on solutions and market forces and capitalism for innovation, and giving people solutions that are going to decouple the solutions from political vagaries and funding crunches or whatever else that come along, like conflicts and wars and so on and so forth. So I just added that piece at the end. Just a timely piece of information on just how US is doing on renewable energy right now. Okay, let's move to the next topic then.